Hi, my name is Alona and I like to garden. Today I'm going to show you the garden beds I built this year. I'm going to tell you how I chose them, why I chose them, how I decided to put them right here, what kind of soil I used to fill them with, what challenges I ran into along the way, and overall, all the different things I learned in the process. If this is something you're interested in, let's go. First things first, let's talk about these beds. They are 4x4 vinyl beds with grid on top that breaks it up into 1x1 square foot sections. But this grid is easily removed to transform the bed into anything you want. The unique challenge I ran into with my beds is that I had to place them on top of my patio that I wanted to protect from any damage or discoloration that can potentially come with having garden beds on top of it. So that is a unique need that I had to problem solve for. As a result, you see my beds are a little bit higher. They're elevated and raised, and that allowed for two things. First, it allowed me to put some bins underneath to catch any drainage and frost from these beds to make sure that it doesn't end up on my tile, causing discoloration. And second, which is my favorite, it brought the beds higher so it is easier for me to garden. Now, how did I get them done? On the whole process, step by step, coming right up.
Hi guys, it's 7 a.m. over here. Everyone at the house is still sleeping, but I have a big day today because today I'm tracking the sun to decide where my garden beds will go. That means that every hour today I'm going to look around my house to see where the sun is at, and by the end of the day I will know for sure which spots get 6+ hours of sunshine. But before I do that, I need some coffee. All right, so here is the logic behind what I'm doing. This is my house, and I do have 3 areas around my house where I can plant things. I don't know how much light I'm getting in each of those areas, so that's what I'm doing today. I basically put different hours throughout the day, starting at 6 a.m. till 10 p.m., where I'm gonna document if the area receives direct sunlight or not. The sunrise today is a little after 7 a.m., so we can put a minus on all the 6 a.m. slots around here. 7 a.m. is also getting no sun, so we're gonna put a minus on those too. Then starting around 8 a.m., I'm expecting to see at least some sunshine appearing on the horizon, probably in this area right here. But basically, I'm setting an alarm for every hour today to check those 3 spots around my house to see if it has sun or not. Wish me luck.
As you can see, the only sunny spot in my yard is the area on top of my drawing here, which gets 6 hours of sunshine. The other 2 areas are getting 3.5 and 4 hours each, which is not enough to have a garden. Now, I do understand the days are going to get longer. It's only the end of March right now, but I do want my garden to have as much sunshine and as much of a chance as possible. So I'm going to put my beds in the top portion of my yard, which happens to be my backyard in real life. To make sure there are no scratches on my patio from these garden beds, I first had to put down some type of protective material. Lucky for me, I had these foam tiles left from a basement project from a couple years ago, so I decided to use those. Now, on top of the foam tiles, we went ahead and placed the cinder blocks. And when I say we, I really mean my husband, who did all the heavy lifting for this project. But on top of the foam tiles went the cinder blocks. They were big enough, heavy duty enough, and inexpensive enough to support these garden beds. On top of the cinder blocks, we placed some plywood. We went with a sheathing grade 3/4 inch plywood as recommended in the square foot gardening book that I'm using for this project. And then finally, on top of the plywood went the actual beds. Now, like I said, drainage was an issue for me. I didn't want anything dripping from these beds onto my tile and leaving stains behind. So I had my husband drill drainage holes in specific places where the water would come down into plastic containers underneath, and I could just dump the water out instead of falling down on the tile underneath. He went ahead and did that. And then finally, on top of the plywood went some landscaping fabric. Landscaping fabric is there to make sure that no water escapes or no soil escapes with the water from these beds. And last but not least, I was able to fill.
I'm gonna fill the beds with Mel's Mix from Square Foot Gardening, and his recipe is a pretty simple one. You need 1/3 of each: peat moss, vermiculite, and compost. Now for the compost part, he does suggest sourcing from 5 different manufacturers to make sure that you get a variety of different nutrients included, and that's what I did. So I got this eco compost, peat humus, earthworm castings, and then mushroom compost. And last but not least, I got dairy manure. Now with manures, he does say that you should not be using more than 20% in your mix, and that's what I got. I only got 1 out of 5. That's dairy manure. So I'm trying to stick to his recipe as much as I can. All of this is enough to fill one 4x4 bed with a depth of about 6 inches, a little bit more. I'm going to have 2 of those beds, so I have another pile over here. The only difference between this one and that one is that in this one, I'm using the earthworm castings. In the other one, I want to put this Trifecta Plus fertilizer. And here's my logic. This earthworm castings bag was pretty expensive. It was over $20 for that little baggie right there. And at that price point, you can get a pretty awesome organic fertilizer. I like Am I Gardener, so my choice is Trifecta Plus. So that's what I'm going to be using. And it'd be interesting to kind of compare the results to see if pure compost will yield amazing harvest, or if that harvest can be further enhanced by adding a good fertilizer like a Trifecta Plus fertilizer. I'll keep you guys posted of my results as they go along.
Last but not least, I've made these hanging baskets. They are 24 inches long, but about 5 inches deep, and I filled them with the same Mel's mix that I put in the main beds. I plan on using it for climbing vegetables like peas and beans. As we were working on these beds, I ended up learning quite a few things, and here they are. First, I am really glad that I took the time to track the sun around my property before putting the beds in, because the spot that my husband and I originally had in mind for these beds was slightly different, and it ended up having not enough sun. So if we were just built beds over there without realizing that there's not enough sun there, I would have run into a lot of issues down the road with my plants struggling or me having to relocate the beds later. Second, don't underestimate the simplicity of this construction and how long it will take you to get it done. I thought with how simple the construction of these beds was, that it would take us just a couple of hours one afternoon and it's going to be easy peasy. Well, I was wrong. It was a much more time consuming and labor intensive project than I originally thought. So make sure you make time and give yourself enough time to get it done. Third, The cinder blocks that we got to support these beds are just your regular size cinder blocks. They're 8 by 8 by 16 inches, which in theory doesn't seem that big, but once we place them underneath these beds, they actually seem pretty large and massive. They do make smaller sizes, like they make the half size of that. And if I were to do the project again, I'd probably consider something like this instead. Fourth, when working on the mix in the bed, if you were to go with the same recipe, the volume that they put on the bags does not exactly translate into the same volume on the ground, which I did not realize that. Now, Square Foot Gardening book does tell you to check volume by bucket, so use like 5-gallon buckets to measure ingredients in equal proportions, which I did that kind of thinking that what a silly step. Everything already has volume specified on the bag. Well, turns out that some of these materials are more compacted than others. And what I mean there is that there are 3 main ingredients. There is compost, vermiculite, and peat moss. And for my beds, I got 6 square feet of each, thinking that, oh, it's going to be the same. Well, by using the bucket method and measuring the volume by the bucket, I ended up running out of compost entirely. So that measurement was pretty accurate, but with vermiculite I had half a bag left, and with peat moss I ended up having probably like a third if not 40% of the peat moss still left, because it is really densely compacted, and once you take it out of the bag it is expands and takes up larger volume than it does in the bag, so keep that in mind. And then last but not least, number 5, speaking of the soil mix, make sure that you have a large tarp available to you to mix the ingredients on. I had a 6 by 8 size tarp that I got thinking that it's going to be enough, and I ended up regretting that. I wished I had a larger one, probably like a 16 by 16. I ended up getting the job done with a 6 by 8, but I think it was a lot harder than it could have been if I had a larger tarp. So if you are still in the process of getting your stuff, make sure that you go for the larger one. With that, thank you for watching my video. If you found it helpful, please give it a like and consider subscribing to my channel. I'm going to be growing a lot of vegetables in these beds this year, as well as a lot of flowers. I love flowers. Again, my name is Alona, and this was Blooming Gardens.